So Sunday class.
Yes, with a sweaty one today.
Yeah.
For sure.
So tell us about your thoughts coming into this program for today's class.
Well, so it was daylight savings this morning, which I think threw me off and a lot of people off, just kind of adjusting to that, even though we knew, hey, it's here. I think everyone just kind of felt a little bit scattered in the beginning. So I had written a flow and decided to change it up at the last minute because it just didn't feel right when I got up this morning, and it was like, okay, let's do something a little bit different. And so when I changed it up, I thought about kind of coordinating right side, left side a little bit, making the brain work a little bit differently, and also incorporating some, jiujitsu / wrestling movement. So a lot of kind of hip mobility stuff, and then I mix some hip stability stuff in as well as a complement. So that's kind of where I went with it. And even initially when we started class, based on how the energy was in the room, people were just kind of needing to be a little quiet and a little grounded at first. A lot of them were tired because maybe normally they'd be asleep at this point. So anyway, I thought, we would change it up like that.
Yeah. It's funny how we kind of just roll with it, right? There's a lot of different things that could have happened differently. Some things could have been bad, some things could have been good. But it was nice to see everybody kind of just roll with it. You just kind of went with everything that happened today too. We started off the day with daylight savings that you mentioned, but it was very close to us not even making it to the studio in time because of our alarm clock being on the tablet, and it was with 2% left when the alarm actually went off. So, I mean, who knows?
It was definitely close.
Yeah, we were cutting it close, right?
Yeah, and like my alarm clock on my side is a traditional clock. It's not a tablet, so it's not connected to Wi-Fi, and it didn't know about daylight savings.
Yeah.
And had I relied on solely that, everything would have been different this morning.
Yeah, but even coming in, typically walking into the room, everybody's pretty chatty, I think. Mm-hmm. Everybody's just catching up with each other, how their Saturday went and how their week's been or things like that, and just chatting with each other. When I walked into class today, everybody that was in there was laying on their back, on their mat, eyes closed. Like, it was just, that's what everybody needed today, I think. And one of the other members came in, and I kind of just warned her, like, hey, I know you're about to go in there, and usually everybody's pretty chatty, but everybody's completely silent today, so I'm just giving you a heads up. You're more than welcome to do the same or go in there and get yourself set up. But that was funny. Everybody was just rolling with it, with however they felt, and it was good. It was good to see. I kind of felt like that too, but being who we are for this studio, sometimes we have to kind of pick up the energy a little bit for other people.
Yes.
But I didn't do anything today. I felt like that's what they wanted and that's what they needed. So kind of just kept it quiet for everybody, and that's how class started, right?
Yeah. And how it started is not how we ended.
Yeah.
But it was kind of nice to kind of gradually ramp up to that. Versus, some weeks where it feels like people have a lot of energy already when they get there, and we just kind of jump in and go.
Yeah.
But today we kind of eased in and ended up in a place that was really strong and really powerful, I thought.
Yeah, the difference between the beginning of class when it was completely silent to the end of class when everybody's kind of laughing and giggling about sharing pain together. Struggling together. It's good. It's kind of like after that practice, like even though it was hard physically, like your energy level is up. You know, just like having a good workout, those kinds of things really give you a lot of energy, even for the rest of the day, I think.
Yeah.
So let's go back to some of the things that you did today that were very heavily connected to wrestling, jiu-jitsu, just grappling in general.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
So I started off the third flow, which is typically my longest flow, once we've kind of warmed up a little bit. I started off the third flow with, it's funny because one of the members is a wrestler from before, so his background is in that, and he recognized it as a wrestling move. I actually took my inspiration for that first movement at the beginning of the flow from watching one of my friend's son's breakdancing competitions, because it was the switch of the hips, you know, almost to like a collapsed reverse tabletop. And that kind of switch of the hips maneuver is really great for mobility, you know, I thought. So I wanted to play around with adding that into the yoga flow. So that's kind of where I got the inspiration, and didn't realize that was actually a wrestling maneuver as well. So that was kind of neat. We talked about that this morning after class. He said it is called a switch.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what it's called in breakdancing, clearly, because that's not my wheelhouse. But that's where I got the inspiration from, watching him at his tournament that day. And I thought one day I'm going to use this in yoga flow, because I think it's really cool, like the movement of it. It's very kind of fluid, and I ended up being able to move that into a scorpion tail, which is what we end up going into after that.
Yeah. Shout out to our b-boy families.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then the second piece, which was in the second part of the flow, was a sit out, and a lot of wrestlers will do that. We've done it in jiu-jitsu class as well.
Yep.
So what's neat about that, what I like about it, is that you kind of have to curl in, right, before you expand out, which is kind of neat. And then you end up opening out through the chest, your leg is extended, you're grounded through the other foot. There's just so much going on there that I really, really like for yoga as well. And a lot of people won't get to experience that kind of movement in a traditional yoga flow. So, you know, I like to take pieces from different places and inspire me to move to, you know, something a little more creative sometimes.
Yeah. I don't know if people know, I think a lot do know that jiu-jitsu is a big part of our life. So you use that as inspiration for a lot of the things that you do in your flows, right?
I do, yes.
You know, we've done a lot of different types of activities. What other ones, like you mentioned b-boy, like what other activities do you see out there that you can incorporate into flows?
I mean, the possibilities are really endless, because I like to study movement, you know, so I mean, sometimes it could be dance. I don't see a whole lot of that, you know, on my daily, but you know, dance-inspired movement's very fluid and graceful, and that's wonderful in a yoga flow as well. And then, you know, wrestling and jiu-jitsu we talked about. Even when people do high-intensity cardio-type exercises, you know, there's certain movements in there that I think are really neat to kind of incorporate, but make it more yoga, I guess. Those are kind of neat as well.
It's not just with your flows, but because you teach the recover classes also, you also look at complementing your yoga class towards a lot of the other activities, right?
Right.
So you've talked about with biking how a lot of bikers don't fully extend their legs. So talk a little bit about that, and then I'll have another sport for you.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm not an avid cyclist by any means, but the times that I have been on the bikes for trail riding or whatever that we've done, I noticed that you're not fully extending your leg as you're cycling through, and you're not meant to. And so there's a lot of the large muscle groups are working there to help you kind of stabilize as you're riding and stuff like that. Well, a lot of times the members that come through here, that do a lot of biking, their hamstrings are kind of a little shortened and tight because of that, because they don't fully extend it and stretch it out unless they do it after they're done, riding or something. So in Recover class, we work a lot of, besides strengthening hamstring and all that and the whole posterior chain, we're lengthening back out so that they can, continue to ride for a very long time and be healthy in doing it.
From what I understand when I ride is that, we never actually fully straighten our legs on the pedals, nor do we pull our knees up very high. So the way the seat is situated and when you're actually riding, like you never actually ride. Like I see some of the kids where their bikes don't actually fit them properly and they're pedaling with their knees like way up high. And proper cycling and proper fit on your bike, you're not actually doing that. So there's only this small window where your knees and your legs are actually moving up and down as you're pedaling. So it really helps when you're fully, when you're working that and allowing them to fully extend. So another one that you've talked about is for soccer players, which I play, and I've told you before where a lot of our soccer players, your feet are not parallel and naturally, so we kind of all open our feet up. In Recover, how do you kind of help complement that and work that?
So I like to work internal external rotation of the hips. So a lot of soccer players with their toes out, and dancers also, toes out a lot. So you want to counter that by internally rotating so your toes are coming in. And that's not a natural position or movement for many people anyway, unless that's just kind of the way your body's built or accustomed over time to do that. But most people don't normally walk or stand internally rotated. You'll see a lot of external rotation typically. But in Recover, we'll do both. So you don't want to ignore the fact that there is a movement that someone does repetitively in a sport or whatever. So you want to still do that, but also counter, so that you can kind of remain balanced. So we work both in Recover as much as possible.
Yeah. What do you think? Let's go back a little bit to the sit-outs and the switches. So when you're doing that, what are kind of the key points to doing that properly in your flow? Like what are you looking out for? What are you making sure that you're doing?
So within the flow, the way I kind of cue it is, you can start from down dog, you can start from like a tabletop position. Tabletop is hands and knees, so your shoulders are over your wrists and your hips are over your knees. I like to start with knees hovered, so like a hovered tabletop, so it's a little modified. Your core is actively engaged there, your glutes and your quads and everything, to get your knees hovered off the mat a little bit. And you push into the hands and everything's super strong before you even start. And then you want to lift the foot that you're about to use to draw across the body. So the grounded foot is the one you pivot on. So you kind of draw it across the chest, so underneath the body. So when you pick up the foot and that knee goes across, and you want to curl in too. So you're pushing away from the mat, you're curling in to make space for this, bent leg to go under. And then the opposite hand lifts up and then reaches back behind you for the floor. So then you're in like a collapsed reverse tabletop position. You still want to keep the foot that you hovered, just keep it hovered. That would be ideal. If you can't do that, you can always certainly lower your hips to the mat or whatever, but both knees should be bent and pointed to the sky. Your chest is nice and open, both hands are grounded behind you, and then shoulders are rolled back.
Okay.
So you're kind of opening,
We'll put that video up on our Instagram, so everybody can see exactly what that flow was and what everybody did. So everybody just follow us on Instagram, and they'll be able to see that little bit of flow and see exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's good to have a visual, I think, with it, so you can see. But it's not like, okay, I'm not a wrestler, so I don't need to do it, or I don't practice jiujitsu, so I don't need to do that. I'll never use that in my life. It's actually really good for, even if you sit a lot at work or something like that, to be able to have your hips mobile instead of kind of settled into a seated position all the time.
Yeah.
And then also to roll the shoulders back and open the chest is great if you round forward and slouch a lot while driving, long distances, or sitting a lot.
So. Yeah. It's just been a weird day, I know I'm flipping back and forth between subjects, but that's kind of how today's been. I don't know how to explain it, but what other benefits do you see with today's class? Like, what other things did you incorporate in today's class and that you had in mind? Like, hey, I want to help this, or I want people to feel this in their body when doing these particular motions, poses.
I mentioned hip stability also. So we're working mobility and being able to kind of move around in the joint, but also stabilizing. So we did a balancing posture, a couple of those, which is nice for that. You really want to hug in to get that, make sure your hips in its, socket, if you will. So you're squeezing the glutes, you're activating all the muscles around the hip and stuff. So that was, meant for that to counter. And then also, I don't know if you noticed, but I cued a little differently on how to get from, high crescent lunge with your arms lifted to transitioning to a warrior two. Because there are different ways you can do that with your arms, because sometimes I may not say anything about how you should have your arms, just where you should end up, let's say. So we know with a high crescent lunge, our arms are, lifted up and overhead. And then if after that we go to a warrior two, and you've opened out, some people just go straight to opening the arms out to a T. Now, today I specifically cued it a little differently, and I did this throughout the flow anytime we were moving from one position to another where it required a bit of balance, to pull into the center first, so palms together, hands at heart center, then turn, and then open. That was meant to be a little more centering, a little more grounding, because it felt like today was kind of a little scattered. So if we just kind of let people do whatever, I don't know what would have happened, but we would have gotten there, but maybe it wouldn't have felt as secure, So I did a lot of that. Pull your hands together in the center, and then we'll open out,
Yeah, that's interesting, because I think that is the theme of today, just scattered. So coming in here and being able to center was really good. It was really good to be able to do that. I had one thing in class that I thought about after class. So on a side lunge, I can't get my heels to the ground on a side lunge. What would you prefer somebody that can't get their heel down to do? So should we even go all the way down, or should we have our thigh parallel to the ground so we're not sitting all the way down? Or is it okay to go all the way down and keep that heel up?
For today's flow, it didn't matter. So it's really kind of what you felt you were getting a good stretch from, and you want to feel stable. Because I had points where I told people to slow down and with control do something, and that was meant to make sure that you kind of figure out where you were strong and you can control your movement. So if going all the way down and lifting the heel didn't feel secure to you, then I don't want you to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you'd rather, and you feel stronger having your foot flat, the one with the bent knee,
mm-hmm.
you know, then you stay up a little higher. But what's important with the side lunge today was that you send your hips back. So you hinge at the hip, hips go back. Then you start to lower. And then from there, you can determine whether you want to lift that heel or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
Because as your hips sink down, you know, your chest should be, you know, popping forward. Or if you stay foot flat and you're hinging back, maybe your chest is kind of facing the ground. And then you'll have to kind of lift up a little bit and then center and then open. That's where we went with it.
So you said specifically for today, was that because of the transition to opening up your arms? That's why it didn't matter as much. What was more important was to bring your hips back so that you can get into that?
Yeah, because you want to be stable. Sometimes if you go too deep and your heel's lifted,
mm-hmm.
and then I ask you to open out, then people will fall back.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So it was more important to once you felt stable, that way we can open the chest out, which is where I was going with it today. Occasionally, if we're meant to go deep into that side lunge, then I'll let people go ahead and ground down with their hands, so they're not just floating on that the ball of their foot or whatever, and then ground down with the hands, maybe one behind, one in front. That way you're not in danger of falling on either side so much.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on, because maybe I want you to be deep so that we can move on to something else from there.
Mm-hmm.
But today it didn't matter.
Okay. Well, what else you got today you want to share about today's class, about anything?
I'm glad that people were able to kind of go with it today. I mean, I think in general on Sundays it's whatever goes, but today it felt like everyone was kind of like in different spots, a little tired. The energy was a little low at first, but it all kind of came together and it was wonderful. And so I'm just grateful that I get to do this and share this with people.
Yeah.
And that they're okay with it being like this. It was dynamic today. Like, I changed things at the last minute, and it was totally fine. People were okay with it, had a good sense of humor.
Oh yeah, for sure. Shout out to Cody and Amanda today from me, because I had to look to them to see where I needed to be a couple of times throughout class today.
Yeah.
I think it's great, not just that I had them on both sides of me, but the fact that they've progressed so much, and their understanding of your cueing has come so far that they are already starting to get into some of these poses and transitioning as you're cueing, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, today I was thankful to have them, one on each side of me. My head's not clear, but having them next to me was able to help my practice today. So shout out to them, Amanda and Cody today.
They've been doing great. I'm so proud of them.
Yeah, good. All right, well, that's Sunday class. That's Sunday in general. What a day, right?
Yeah.
Hope everybody has a good rest of the week, and that daylight savings doesn't ruin them anymore. All right, good class.
Thank you.